This is the first time in the history of the fucking Earth that we can change DNA. We can recode life.
We can definitely create some really interesting animals, like unicorns, flying dragons. Look, I love sci-fi. I think growing up, I thought the world in 2024 was going to be more sci-fi like.
One of the things wrong right now in biotech and science in general is everybody's doing the same shit. How do we get people to do the crazy stuff? You can really genetically modify a human in your garage if you wanted to.
What are the really cool things being worked on in here?
Creating animals that people have never seen before. We're really interested in creating a six-legged land mammal.
Look at where we are. It's just a lot of regulation, a lot of fear. Everyone's kind of doing the same thing over and over again.
Josie Zayner, a biohacker breaking the rules, and Cathy Tie, an entrepreneur reshaping biotech. Together, they challenge the limits of what's possible, going beyond academia to uncover groundbreaking experiments that could redefine humanity.
Why not focus on curing diseases and trying to extend human life?
Making dinosaurs is way cooler. Now is a time where we have to figure out how to almost hack the regulatory process.
CIA, if you're listening to this, I am not doing anything sketchy.
Dr. Zayner, Cathy, thank you both for having me in your lab today. I'm so excited to be here and to get
I can't believe you call me Dr. Zayner. That's so kind of you. Nobody ever, it's so funny, you know, receiving a PhD. Nobody ever calls me doctor, and that's like the best part of getting a PhD, I think. The only good part, maybe.
You're a doctor to me. You've done all the work, all the studying, gotten the degrees. So I want to start with a little background on you two, kind of where you're both from, how you both got into what you both do now, of like working in bioengineering and biotech, and the story of you two meeting.
So I grew up in Toronto, Canada. Mississauga, actually. It's a suburb near Toronto. I've always been interested in biotech research, working in labs since I was 14, and published my first paper when I was 16, and by the time I was in college, I decided to start a biotech company. And then that became funded by a VC in San Francisco, which led me to going there and really growing that company at a really young age. Then I got paid to drop out of school by the TL Fellowship. So that pushed me to go down a really different type of path. And after starting two companies now and also being a VC for a while in Silicon Valley, I decided to start a new project with Dr. Josie Zayner, and that is what you're seeing today. Super early days, but we're really excited about what we're building. That's a little bit of myself.
And the names of those various companies along the way, what were they?
My first company was called Renomics. It was a genomic services company. We built mutation libraries for different pharma companies and as well as biotech, synthetic biology companies.
Cool.
Got that company to kind of just be a biotech services company, a profitable one since I was 21. So relatively different type of story than a lot of biotech companies. I started when I was 18 and kind of just went down that path. Then I became a VC at a firm called Servant Ventures, mostly focused on enterprise software, and was there for about a year and a half. I was, I think, the youngest partner at a Silicon Valley venture fund of over $100 million. At the time, I was 21, and then after that, I started another company called LockBio, which is a digital health platform company, sort of like the Shopify of prescription drugs. We're operational in the US and Canada primarily, and that's all about kind of selling prescription drugs compliantly with doctors and the pharmacies involved. And then Los Angeles project is something we'll talk about today.
And yourself, the journey to get here?
Long journey. I grew up on a farm in Indiana, and then lived my young adulthood on the south side of Chicago. I got a master's degree in cell and molecular biology, and then a PhD from the University of Chicago in biochemistry and biophysics. But I was kind of just like, I don't know, academia is not my thing. Some people love the whole publish and perish and writing to get grants. The crazy thing I learned about academia was like, after you become a professor, you never do experiments anymore. And I was like, why do you train all this time to do science and then you just quit, you know? Yeah. So I decided to try to do something else, and I joined NASA, worked as a research fellow at NASA Ames in Silicon Valley, and everybody was starting companies, and I was just like, fuck it, maybe I should start a company. And I saw a great need for scientists. I mean, I think one of the things wrong right now in biotech and science in general is like everybody's doing the same shit, you know?
Yeah. What is that same shit?
And it's just like, how do we change that? How do we get people to do the crazy stuff and more interesting? And I think that's because like all the people doing it come from the same training, the same background. So I started the Odin, which was to teach people from any background, whether you had a degree or not, how to do genetic engineering, which was probably my worst idea ever. It's like, let me sell a physical product. Never done it. I've never ran a company before. And it's been a wild experience. It's still running today. But it's trained so more people than any university in genetic engineering, which is just fucking crazy. Cathy and I were both in the Bay Area at the same time. We were probably in the same room a bunch. We knew of each other, you know, really had high opinions of each other, and started interacting online. And Cathy was like, oh, we should chat. I have this secret project I want to tell you about. And we chat, and I was like, oh my God, I have the same idea. Like, I've been thinking about something really similar. Like, we should work on it together. And so we started the Los Angeles project, and we've really only been running for the past 6 months or so, but the boundaries we've pushed already are crazy, and the stuff we're doing is just like, it's so exciting, I think. And I think it's going to be one of the most, to me, in my life, it's like, this is the most exciting thing in all of genetic engineering, like in all of biotech. And I wish people saw that, and I want to push it forward with everything I got, if you know.
What was that initial vision that you kind of drew you two together for the LA project?
I can talk a little bit about that. So I think from my perspective, I was just during COVID, I was in bed, lazy Saturday morning. I was watching Netflix. There was a docuseries called Unnatural Selection. And I was just going, you know, watching episode by episode. I got so inspired. Just the fact that, I mean, it is what it sounds like, unnatural selection. It's using gene editing to create changes in biological life and therefore disrupting the natural selection process that happens in nature. And I really like that. But you know, but a lot of the systematic challenges that Josie talks about it really comes down to the systems don't really support creative and really disruptive uses of that technology, but it's definitely there. I mean, gene editing is such a powerful technology that is currently boxed in biopharma applications and academia. That's pretty much it. But it can really reprogram all of human life. And on top of that, it can build really powerful technologies that can also be used for defense, agriculture, a lot of different applications.
Yeah, it's like, this is, when you think about it, this is the first time in the history of the fucking Earth, in the history of life on Earth, that we can change DNA.
Yeah.
We can recode life, the DNA of living things, the first time. And like, people are like, I'm gonna make weird lab mice and maybe a gene therapy to treat a disease. Good, great for you. But like, we can literally program self-replicating matter, right? That's what biology is. It's self-replicating matter. We can literally program that shit. And that's all you want to do? Like, don't you want to create fucking Pokemon or unicorns or some shit? I mean, that's what I want to create.
Yeah.
Like, why are we trying to do that? I think that's what it all stems from. Cathy and I, it's like, why aren't we trying to do that? Why aren't people trying to push these boundaries and instead just like settle for boring shit?
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's also a lot more to kind of the initial vision of this as well, where, you know, when it comes to even the name of this, Los Angeles Project, the way we see this technology is that it can actually be even more powerful than nuclear weapons many years ago, you know, 70 years ago. But the way that the system is set up is that it doesn't actually allow for any development, compliant or not. It just kind of stops everything before it even begins. And so I wanted to push the boundaries a little bit more. And with this name, we kind of wanted to create our own box of what we can be and what this technology can be. So that morning I saw a natural selection, I was inspired, and then I started, reaching out to, I just started following Josie at first, and I didn't really say anything, and Josie's like, why are you following me on every single platform?
Why are you stalking me, Cathy?
I have this idea, and it's one of those like dark ideas you have, keep it to yourself. And I was like, I think I should share it. I think, Josie would really understand what I'm talking about. And very luckily, we bonded over that. We really connected over that idea. And, and now we kind of turn it into the beginning of a reality.
So you talked about the LA project and kind of trying to use this as a vehicle to break out of traditional or like academia or normal settings for bioengineering. Talk to me a little bit about like the legalities of this, like one, putting gene editing kits out, commercializing it so that anyone can do it. Can anyone do it? Like, is that legal? Anyone, like, can I do it at home?
Yeah.
And then two, I guess just doing this independently. Like, how do you make it work with all the laws?
I think in the U.S. it's pretty open, and also Canada. I think it's less legal gray area and more regulation gray area with the FDA and places like that. There are, like when I was in California, states that have tried to make laws to stop some of this stuff, but generally there's no laws against people doing genetic engineering in their home in the United States. No laws about that.
Wow.
And with the research we do, we comply with all the regulations that we've been in talks with the FDA. But it's like, I think also now is a time where we have to figure out how to almost hack the regulatory process, right? And Cathy and I have thought a lot about that. Regulatory arbitrage, she's involved a lot with the network states.
CIA, if you're listening to this, I am not doing anything sketchy.
I don't know about that. Don't trust her. She seems very trustworthy.
No, I think first of all, we believe in doing everything compliantly. I think this is such an important research area, and to jeopardize it with something that violates a really major regulation would be foolish for the long term of the industry, and that's something we definitely don't want to do.
Yeah.
In gene editing, I think primarily the one regulation we all know about, from public health to scientists, is you definitely cannot do it on humans. Like human embryos, of course, is completely off limits. There was somebody that got into trouble for it. And so we don't plan on doing any human work at the lab at all.
Okay.
That's something we definitely draw the line on. So we take this very seriously, and as Josie said—
Not in the lab. Not in the lab.
Not in the lab, we're not doing human work. Fair enough.
But yeah, anyways, we do work with also regulators to make sure that we're compliant on the animal stuff that we do as well.
Yeah. Outside the lab, and again, not on human embryos, but like, what does gene editing look like? Is it literally as simple, like, is a vaccine capable of editing genes, or like, can you create your own shot that can do that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, and maybe it's probably the most overused saying in tech, but William Gibson, the sci-fi author, said, the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. And it's like, I don't think people understand how far along we are in terms of changing DNA and what we can do.
Yeah.
Like, you can just order DNA from a company or, a virus or something like that, inject yourself with it and change your DNA for like $500,
Wow.
right? It's crazy what we can actually do and like the level of understanding that exists. And it's just like, I think that's one of the ways that Cathy and I are really trying to, take advantage and exploit this, because it's like, people, I think, don't see it, that like, we can really do interesting stuff.
Yeah.
You can really genetically modify a human in your garage if you wanted to. But for us, it's just
you shouldn't.
You shouldn't.
How can we do the most? Like, yeah, if you're selling some shitty gene therapy that gives you bigger muscles or something like that, the impact that that's going to have, to me, just seems so minor, right? And so what we want to do is have a bigger impact, allow greater things to happen in the world. It's like, what would happen if we had intelligent animals that could talk,
Have you heard of the term designer babies?
Yeah, for sure.
Talk to me a little bit about that, like the ethical implications, and you kind of talked about how it's right now it's already kind of uneven, like the access and the knowledge to this information is kind of uneven right now. Philosophically, what do you both think about like where we're going and making sure that stuff like this is accessible or, I don't know, equitable? Or
I think I'm pro thinking outside the box, but I also draw a line between a technology that's not yet ready and public health. I think with designer babies, I mean, that's sort of a general, pretty big umbrella. I think there's different segments to it. There's literally gene editing in human embryos, which is currently banned. That is not possible right now. And then there's kind of small companies here and there that are doing these gene selection from embryos. Like you're looking at different embryos through IVF, and you're selecting for genes that you desire in your future baby. I think that's a technology that has potential, but genomics, when it comes down to it, is really a data problem. It's really about getting as much data as possible to draw conclusions on what different genes do. I think in terms of that technology, my personal opinion is that it's still kind of in its early days. But generally, I am super pro thinking outside the box. In the distant future, when there are proper education and really good technology in place with good data, I'm pro-choice for people to choose that outcome. That's sort of my stance.
Yeah, I think it's like, look, this shit is going to happen. How do we make it equitable, right? And I think that's the big question is like, it's already happening with IVF, even without selecting. Like IVF, you generally select for healthy babies that don't have illnesses or diseases, right? So we're starting to create a stratification of classes where people who are getting IVF and can afford it, their children are healthy.
Wow.
Right? So even before we do anything, select for anything, it's already starting. And so now it's like, how do we make this more accessible to people? How do we make the technology? To me, I think that starts with, knowledge.
Yeah.
With education, right? Education is probably one of the most powerful things you can give somebody, and knowledge, right? And it's like, when you could help people understand what's going on, what they can do, maybe then they can genetically engineer themselves in a garage if they need to make it more equitable.
Where are we at now? Like, if you could give a snapshot in time of what's currently possible versus what you think will be possible in the next, 10 years, even from your own lab here and the work with the LA project.
Right now, I think the thing that we're trying to figure out and we're most interested in and putting a lot of effort into is being able to do a large number of gene edits on an organism at the same time in order to change its genetics so that we can create whatever we want. There are a lot of bottlenecks and things there, but I think we have a pretty good grasp and we're making a lot of progress forward on that stuff. Yeah. Just to do like massive numbers of edits and massive numbers of embryos to understand how everything works so that we could basically, sculpt life.
Yeah, I think in kind of layman's terms, it's really about cracking the code of life. It's such a big amount of code to crack. Like there's 3 billion nucleotides in a human, and then there's also different animals with different codes of life, and it's all about data. At the end of the day, it's all about drawing correlations between what you get in real life, like a phenotype, and the genotype, like the genes that contribute to, let's say, black hair or intelligence or whatever it is that we're looking for from an outsider's perspective. It's getting the code that correlates with that. That part is really challenging and is one that requires a massive amount of testing, data, experimentation, and the reason why we're focused on creating a really streamlined platform that does a lot of gene edits at the same time is so we can gather that data as much as possible, and ultimately, with more data in 10 years' time, as you can imagine, when you crack a code, you can basically build anything you want with the building blocks of what you understand. That's really where the industry can get to. The more code that we can crack, the more type of things that we can build with those building blocks. That's the analogy I like to run with this type of technology, and also from a systematic perspective, like based on where the industry has been since I've entered it like 10 years ago, it's so much focused on pharma applications and testing in mice that all the data that we have is really on the select few genes that contribute to monogenic diseases in humans,
for sure.
or like just mice. But what about the
Like
millions?
mice have been cured of every disease, given every disease and cured of every disease.
Really?
Yeah.
If they ever become sentient, you know, they're set, you know.
Yeah, like, but what about the millions of other organisms? What can we learn from that in nature? What are the building blocks that we can gain from understanding those organisms and put it into, what we can create with life in the future? And that, as we mentioned, like a lot of applications can come up from that. And yeah, we just want to kind of open up the gates to get data from as many organisms as possible. Also understand more about human genetics down the road. Yeah.
Short term though, like what are the really cool things being worked on in here?
Oh God, I mean, the things we're really interested in is creating animals that people have never seen before. We're really interested in like creating a 6-legged land mammal.
Okay.
None exist,
Yeah, I can't even imagine it.
right? And you'd think about this stuff and you'd be like, oh shit, like scientists have mutated mice crazy and nobody's ever really looked at this stuff,
Yeah.
right? And it's like learning to mold and craft body plans and do stuff that nobody has ever done before. Because once you could, it sounds cute and fun making a 6-legged land mammal or making a mouse with a horn or something. But when you can do that, that means you can understand the genetics and what's going on,
Yeah.
right? And that's more the goal, is like, it's an example of just being able to understand things. And we're kind of looking at a lot of examples like that right now.
Yeah. It's interesting when I talk to people about, whenever I share the term transhumanism, they're like, whoa, I've never heard that. What is that? And I usually explain it as like the school of philosophy that's focused on using tech and engineering to basically be able to augment human life.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is as I come in here and you kind of showed me some of the different animals in there, and the most interesting I thought was like taking the glowy material, or I don't know, the glowy genetics out of a jellyfish and putting it into other animals that could then glow. It almost sounds, it sounds like that very clearly, like this superhuman almost, like you're giving people.
Like X-Men.
Yeah, like almost like X-Men. You're giving people powers. You could give them a horn. You could make them glow in the dark. You could have them grow wings. So yeah, again, I guess I would kind of ask, like, philosophically, what do you imagine like the future of the human species almost is? Like it's boundless possibilities. Like a human could fly in 50 years. Another one could, I don't know, be like a horse. Like where do we go?
I think we can definitely create some really interesting animals, like unicorns, flying dragons. If regulation allows it, I'm sure some humans would want to,
Test things
make
on
themselves X-Men, which
Yeah.
I love sci-fi. I think growing up, I thought the world in 2024 was going to be more sci-fi-like. That's what we were told. That's where all the cartoons, those superhero movies led us to believe.
Yeah.
Look at where we are. It's just a lot of regulation, a lot of fear. Everyone's kind of doing the same thing over and over again. If you're interested in science, get stuck in like a 10-year cycle of academia. And then by the end of it, you get all the creativity knocked out of you and you just publish papers every single day and live on a $40K a year salary.
Yeah.
That's literally it. Like that is not sci-fi to me, and that's not fun. That's not creative. So that's the reason why I embarked on such a interesting and different path. But what I'm most excited about is giving that sci-fi dream back to the people because they deserve it, right? That's what we all really, really want, or a lot of people want that, and that's the taxpayers, and the taxpayers fund the grants that are given to academia. So I wish that in 50 years, 10 years even, there is more sci-fi in the world, and that could include animals that could fly, like flying dragons, unicorns, cool humans, X-Men, things like that.
Even crazier, it's like, I think the thing that we really want is every animal, living thing that exists has come from an ancestor, a lineage. And we want to create new lineages of organisms, of animals, right?
Yeah.
We want to create things people have never seen before. And with humans, I'm sure everybody's just going to be like, you can see with like Ozempic and shit, people are just going to be like, I want to be fitter and stronger and whatever. And that's cool and all, but I think the artists, the people who are the crazy ones, we're going to see some really crazy and interesting stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, that's what I'm most excited for. These just like crazy lineage breaking stuff. It's like, fuck being able to run fast. That to me doesn't seem really cool.
I agree. I want
You
my
know?
kids to breathe underwater.
Right?
I want gills.
Or just like whatever. Survive in outer space. You know, like human bodies aren't meant to survive in microgravity in the vacuum of space and shit like that, right?
Yeah.
It's like we'll probably need genetically modified humans to survive out there, to live out there, live lives out there. And so it's like there's so many things that are possible, and I feel like people are so short-sighted sometimes with just being like, I want to live forever, I want to run fast. It's like, yeah, sure, great, that's boring.
Yeah.
Like, don't you want to like swim in the oceans of Europa or some shit? Like, you know?
Yeah. So, I mean, that brings us to the current zeitgeist, which is like biohacking. What are the thoughts on like current biohacking community and culture? The Brian Johnsons,
I guess
and
that's
the Dave Asprey's and such of the world.
I don't, you know, like, I don't think there's, I think people are actively trying to benefit humanity. And, you know, like, you can definitely knock them and just be like, you know, oh, olive oil or butter in your coffee, like, you're not going to live, I'll say this right now, you're not going to live forever by putting butter in your coffee or drinking olive oil. I'm sorry to break it to you, anybody who's watching this, like, drinking a fucking veggie shake, like, you're not going to live forever. I'm sorry. The truth is, Cathy and I always talk about this, that, like, a lot of this is in our genetics. That's the reality, you know?
Yeah.
A lot of our longevity, our disease susceptibility, a lot of this stuff is in our genetics. And it's like, until we can understand that and modify that and do that, it's like, yeah, you might get a little bit more time, another year or two on the earth or something, but like, nobody's going to live to 200 by taking shots of olive oil.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sorry.
So the research that you all do, though, that it seems like it's so much further than, or so much different from just like curing diseases, right? Because you're going a lot.
For sure.
So why not focus on that, curing diseases and trying to extend human life?
Making dinosaurs is way cooler.
Okay. Fair enough.
I think there's a lot of people working on curing diseases
Yeah.
already, and
Mhm.
there's a very
Yeah.
fundamental, like, core, like, incentive model that works with clinical trials, pharma companies, etc. I think what we're trying to do is overcorrect the industry. We want to change the way we think about things, because everyone already thinks about curing diseases, diagnostics, biotech services. And I think for such an early technology, it's we have to go beyond that, and we want to be the people to overcorrect the industry.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's a hard job. It really is. It's like in the 40s or something, and people are, scientists are trying to think of, this is perhaps not the best example, but, you know, nuclear weapons. It's like, why are we just using it for war when we can also use it for energy?
Right.
That's kind of what we're trying to do, is like change the application a little bit, or change the way we think about a fundamental technology when it's super early, so that we can open ourselves up to more possibilities down the road as an industry.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And it's not like the stuff we can't do might never have an application in pharma or something like that. But I think pigeonholing ourselves and that just extremely limits you. And everybody's done that. And so that's why we're at the place we're at. And so not pigeonholing ourselves, you know, allows us to expand the industry. Yeah.
What about the merging of technology, maybe more recently AI as well, with the bioengineering world? Can you give me some insight into that a little bit? Are there applications of, I don't know what you think of, all I can think about right now is like prosthetics, I guess, like as that being some way of adding on to life, or like a Neuralink type integration. But I don't know, are there other applications that you all are thinking about, like tech meeting human life, or just life of any kind?
I think there are two answers I have to that. There's the bioengineering meets AI, like LLMs, which is what is currently being done. People have been trying to do this for the last 10 years, which is let's use AI LLMs to try to understand what different genetic mutations mean. Countless companies have been trying to do this for drug discovery, diagnostics of genetic mutations, like genetic testing. I think that will continue to happen, and as we get more data from the industry, the better those LMs will be to feed us data that can help us find the best protein for enzymes or for drugs. That'll continue to happen with more and more data. So I think that's a great use of AI in bioengineering. However, I think what's even more exciting is that if you think about AI, historically it's been an industry that has been developed based on our understanding of the brain. So deep learning, a lot of the current AI technologies that we use are based on our understanding of neuroscience. And that's actually a really interesting link to me between genetics and bioengineering and AI, because everyone in AI talks about AGI in the next 5 to 7 years, or some people are even more bullish, like 1 year, like, no, that's not going to happen. But the thing is, we're not going to be able to get to AGI without understanding human brains better. And that comes from biology, because no one is born with a blank slate. We're not born like a computer with people giving us data and then we have an algorithm in our heads to compute the data. No, we're born with a set of instructions, just like any other animal out there. Like a fish is born, hatched eggs, and then they just start swimming. Like, did people feed them data? I don't think so, right? So it's really interesting how all of that information on how to do things, how to learn, how to be active in life, like that's all compressed in 3 billion nucleotides, which is DNA for humans. And that's actually where a lot of answers are. Therefore, when it comes to understanding human brains better, which helps train AI to become AGI, the answer is actually in genetics. So there's two parts to that question. They're kind of different, so I just wanted to cover both.
I think right now, honestly, the use of AI in biology is dumb. It's not really doing anything new. Everybody's like, oh, let me use an LLM to like make this protein, but it's based. The problem with LLMs is they're based on what's already been made. So nobody's making anything new, right? So every protein is like, yeah, sure, you can make a new Cas9 CRISPR protein, but it's still a Cas9 protein, right? And so I think it's extremely limiting. We need more information. We need to do things different. And I think really understanding how, the brain works and how we learn and stuff like that can contribute a lot more. Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit what CRISPR is, how it works, and kind of, how people who are, I guess, young people can start getting involved in gene editing?
Yeah, CRISPR is, a modern gene editing technique we use here in the lab a lot with our animals and stuff. And basically, it allows you to target any gene in the genome for genetic modification, which is really amazing. Because obviously, if you're going to rewrite the code, you need to be able to rewrite specific sections. And CRISPR allows you to do that. I think right now, it's crazy how easy it is to use CRISPR, We sell CRISPR genetic engineering kits that anybody can use, hands-on, no experience needed. But when we started working with embryos and stuff like that, it's just like, order the thing we want from the company, inject it in the embryo, boom.
Wow.
It's like
animal
that simple.
Embryos. If you're a
Animal
regulator
embryos.
and watching this, we do not look at human embryos.
Right.
Right? And it's just like that. It's just like, oh shit, that's crazy. I can just like.
And then you just see what happens when it hatches or comes to life.
Yeah, when it's born, when it gestates, whatever way, and you can, either it's something that can be observed with a phenotype, an outward expression of the gene, or it's something that we can sequence the genome and see if the genetic modification worked. And like I said, we're working on targeting many genes at the same time, different techniques that are easier so we don't have to inject it. So we can like zap it with electricity or use chemicals. And it's just like we are getting to the place where we can scale gene editing on embryos to where we can edit thousands of embryos at once to test thousands of things, to then understand how it all works and use that data for whatever, like helping AI, creating dragons or unicorns or making intelligent animals, right? It's like the only intelligent life we know of that exists is biological, right?
Yeah.
Why not go to there for a fucking blueprint?
Yeah. In doing this work, I imagine even being in Austin or in Texas, there's a lot of, high population of religious people. Do you ever find that there is like pushback against this stuff when you talk to people and you're like, yeah, I'm creating new species of animals and it's super exciting, and that excitement might be met with like fears of, I don't know, Jurassic Park or dragons being scary?
Yeah, I mean, with every great technology, it's a double-edged sword. But I think for the last 70 years, humanity has slowed down progress so much in every single technology sector except for computer science. And that actually requires sort of an overcorrection of really brave experts of a technology being able to say, no, we have to go the other way a little bit. And that overcorrection can definitely scare some people, but for the people that are also aligned with humanity deserves more, they would also understand that we need those brave souls to come out and actually push a technology forward.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, definitely get hate mail, definitely get, weird people, and it's just, like Cathy said, I think it's like whenever you're pushing boundaries, people are going to be afraid. It's going to be hard, but it's like that's why everybody doesn't do it, right?
Yeah, but the same technology that can, cure diseases and, create sci-fi outcomes can definitely be used for destruction as well. That's why it's important for us to also do this in a way that is transparent with the public, and we that's something we really value. I think the people deserve to be part of this technology in whichever way possible.
Yeah, for sure.
What I don't believe in is gatekeeping that and just keep doing it in secret. That's not what I want either. So.
Do you publish papers when you do stuff independently like
Fuck
this?
publishing papers.
Do you put out information and data, or what do you do?
No, a lot of the stuff that we work on or that we want to share, we think is worth sharing, we just share with the world, post it online, white paper, whatever. It's like, why gatekeep? Why try to submit it to a journal?
Yeah.
And especially, we're trying to change the way science is done. And so like a paper doesn't make any sense. If you make a fucking unicorn, I don't have to write a scientific paper, right? Like it's there. You want more data? It's like fucking touch the horn, right? Seriously though. And I think a lot of the science that is done right now is not goal-based. It's like mental masturbation in order to make people feel good. And that's why they need to publish papers.
Because it makes them feel good, publishing papers.
It's like if you create something, nobody has to prove to write a scientific paper about creating the next GPU or like, all these things. No, it's there, it exists, it works.
What's wrong in your experience then in like and at what stage in like the academic cycle where it goes from this excitement, working on cool stuff in the lab, to then it's like, they get you, they convince you like, no, like you should just have other people do your lab work and you put out papers and,
The stage that's bad is that academia exists.
But we have to teach people about stuff like this too.
I think right now the system is just so convoluted that it's really hard to separate it out and make something. That's why we push a lot for people to learn on their own, people to discover this on their own. It's like, you look at open source software, a lot of open source software was created by hobbyist programmers.
Yeah.
That's where a lot of it came from, right? The number one operating system in the fucking world that is used for everything, Android, Linux, was created by Linus Torvald, a Finnish master's student in his fucking apartment, right?
Yeah.
The number one operating system in the world. And we say, why can't that happen with biotechnology? Why do we need the gatekeeping? Why do we need the publishing? Why do we need all this stuff?
Expensive labs.
Yeah, why can't somebody in their garage create what is? And I think it's possible. I think it's just like, you have to educate people. You have to put it out there. And it's hard work. It's a lot of effort. But like, I think we are willing to put in that effort to change it because it's not getting us anywhere. You know, even we talk about drugs, there's like 60 new FDA approvals a year, and like 75% of those are reformulations. So old drugs that just have a small change so they can get another patent. There's like how many diseases, and we're approving 50, 60 drugs a year, and most of them aren't even for new drugs. Like, this is not going to get anybody treated for any disease anytime soon. We need like fundamental changes in biology, and I think that's what Cathy and I are really pushing for.
Yeah.
We need to just fucking tear down the system, so to speak. You know, academics, do your thing. We don't care. You can do your thing. We don't mind. But also, like, I think we really do need fundamental changes.
Definitely, because another part of me thinks that all the dollars, if the majority of the dollars for bioengineering goes to academia, right? So this has to be independently funded, which is probably somewhat of a challenge because then it distracts from the work. But I'm curious a little bit about that. Like, what do like your investors look like? Are they also really just interested in creating unicorns and dragons, or, you know, like what do they dream of?
Yeah, they're actually really creative and cutting edge people that do believe in a sci-fi future like dragons and unicorns. But yeah, when you're creating something so new in an industry that is so old, you end up running into established playbooks, like investors being really used to established clinical trial playbooks and pharma commercialization. But we also believe there's a good amount of capital now, I think, with a lot of new waves of frontier tech, like AI and crypto, building more wealth and having more financial distribution to people building cool stuff, that money will also trickle down to cutting edge industries like biotech, of people doing things that are really new as well. That's what we're seeing. So what I'm hoping is a future where all frontier tech can thrive independently of the system, and eventually, hopefully, the system can catch up to really support this frontier area as well. Yeah, I mean, I think with the publishing thing, just comment there. I mean, I've only published 2 papers in my life, and that's when I was like under 20, so it's been a while. But what really bothers me about that is, you know, taxpayers fund the research, and then it gets done, and then it gets published, and then they charge, like they being the publications, they charge so much money for anybody to access that. It's like, in what other industry does that exist? It's like, I paid for that with my tax dollars. Why can't I do the research?
You'll have people be like, I'm suffering from this illness, and I want to read this paper because it has ways to treat this, and they're charging me $50, $100 just to read the scientific paper that was funded with public taxpayer money. And it's just like, it's just really, really gross. Yeah, I think it's, you know, for investors, it's different. You know, it's definitely, it can definitely be a little complicated sometimes because they're just used to very traditional stuff. But we have found some amazing investors who support us a ton and just really want us to push forward with all this stuff. And that's been amazing, exciting. But yeah, we really want to find people who align with us. And I think that's the hard part. People who don't want to push us into like, you should do some pharma stuff or you should do this stuff, you know, who just let us build, you know, because that's all we want. We just want to fucking build. And as we're building, it's like, we're going to make cool shit. We are making cool shit. Yeah. You know?
Recently, or somewhat recently, there was the famous case of, I'm not sure his name, but someone in China who did the gene editing. Yes, did gene editing. Can you explain the story a little bit?
Yeah, so in 2019, there was a researcher named Dr. He who published the fact that he created the world's first gene-edited babies, human babies, twins, a pair of twins named Lulu and Nana. They were both gene-edited at the embryo stage. And it was to knock out a gene that is associated with HIV. So the idea is to have these twins grow up to be children and then adults who cannot contract HIV. And right after that was published, it caused an international uproar of scientists, public health officials, everybody adjacent to science as well, you know, saying and condemning him for his research that was unethical and irresponsible. Then he was placed into jail for 3 years in China, and I believe he's out of jail now. And there is still a lot of, I think that event alone has instilled a lot of fear, even more fear than what was already there in academic researchers and scientists in general.
And is gene editing of human embryos allowed anywhere in any setting in the world?
I'm sure, yeah. I mean, you have to understand there are a lot of countries that just don't have medical regulatory bodies.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there are places people could definitely do it. I think there's a lot of things that can be done, but I think the big question is like, what are the repercussions of a lot of these things? And I think that's the bigger question, is not like whether it can be done or not, because there's a lot of stuff we can do with genetic engineering, and it's just, what are the repercussions of this? And I think that's a more complicated question, because it's just like, is the world ready socially and culturally for this? You know?
What do you think?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
You know?
I think we have to make them ready, right? Like, we have to be the ones to be like, hey, Beyonce, whichever artist, like, bring this unicorn out on stage with you, and then people will be ready. You know, it's as simple as that. But it's about connecting these different industries together, and that's the interdisciplinary part that needs to happen, and requires like a lot of bravery on both sides of the industry to make that collaboration happen. That's what is needed for everyone to be ready.
And there's nowhere even in academia where people are doing work on human embryos.
Yeah, but it's so usually human embryos you can't let live past 14 days if you've experimented on them. And people are doing work on making artificial embryos and all this stuff, but I think right now the fact that the majority of science is in academia, I think this is what creates the pushback on a lot of boundary pushing experiments in technology, because unfortunately society and culture are really influenced by academia. Academia is, you know, Cambridge was around when the Aztecs, or Oxford was around when the Aztecs were around. It's fucking crazy to think about that these institutions, you know, tens, hundreds of billions of dollars of endowments, like, they have a grip on society and culture. And until we start moving away from that a little bit, I think it's just going to be slow in areas that involve human experimentation.
Also, just a quick note on Dr. He.
Yeah.
I actually have an interview with him that is on my YouTube channel. It's Cathy Tie. Just search Cathy Tie on YouTube. It was his first interview that he did, public-facing interview after he got out of jail. And one quick update is that the twins are healthy. They're about 5 or 6 years old now.
Oh.
And they do not carry that gene that allows them to carry HIV. So it means the experiment worked based on what Dr. He said. Just a quick update there.
I think people sometimes don't understand how much culturally and socially how much that influences tech. Like, tech influences culture and culture influences tech. And you can't separate the two. And so it's just like, right now we're trying to do both. We're trying to influence culture, you know, and take the influences from culture and integrate it into what we're doing.
Are there any like current, I don't know, I guess they're not things that are popular or available to the public, but are there any current like moonshots or exciting progressions that you've seen that make you excited? Like peptides, for example, is one, like Ozempic and semaglutide now being on the market seemingly is like this big deal, but does that spark excitement that like we're making some sort of progress in biohacking of sorts, like people or bioengineering of sorts, people are now more willing to maybe inject themselves with things? Maybe that's like the first hurdle. Is any of that exciting, or?
I think we're constantly moving forward towards this stuff. I mean, you can't stop the future from coming, right?
Yeah.
It's the pace that we get there more. And I think Ozempic is really exciting because, like, I mean, I guess you could say obesity is a disease or illness, but like, it's also kind of like the first FDA accepted, like, cosmetic drug that treats more like cosmetic
Yeah, interesting.
things in people, which
Yeah.
I think is, for that reason, it's really interesting and cool because it's going to get people start trying to do a lot more stuff along that. Because
Yeah.
it's like, I don't, obviously, tattoos and I think our body is a canvas to just like explore and create and do stuff with. And I'm excited that the government is now starting to, even though it's really slow and even though it's just like losing weight, we're starting to get in there where we're making drugs more available for people to modify their bodies. Because that's really what it is. It's a body modification. It's subtle, but it's a body modification.
And you mentioned a little bit socially, like the best ways, like bring a unicorn on stage. But even before that, like can happen. I don't know, any perspective on like socially what needs to happen to change, or like how people's perspective needs to change on the like on what we think of human life or consciousness even.
That's deep.
I think people need to demand sci-fi futures.
Yeah,
There's this famous
that's a
quote.
good
I think
one.
it was Peter Thiel. It was, we wanted flying cars, and instead we got 140 characters.
Yeah.
And that continues to be the case. Even after that was said, it's still literally nothing happened.
Yeah.
So I think people need to demand more of that and be open to that future. And I think people, deep inside are like all those superhero movies, and like the popularity of, even X-Men, right? I know we keep coming to that example, but it's such a good one. It's like none of like I feel like things like that. It doesn't really exist when it should.
Yeah.
And also the enthusiasm for that. I think it's like we get distracted by like TikTok reels and like Instagram reels and TikTok videos and just really dumb things all the time. But we need to stay focused about what the future of humanity is, especially Gen Z, and I think I'm a Zillennial. I think that's what's called. Like, we need to demand more from life. We can't just passively go through stuff, and just be at the mercy of a system that was set up before we were here.
Yeah.
That
for
doesn't make
sure.
any sense. And
sure.
we have to be the ones that demand that change. Be open and curious about new technologies, get involved somehow, like just do more, like think outside the box. Don't get passively distracted by things that are easy to consume. I think
Yeah.
that's what I think needs to happen immediately.
Yeah, and it's just like, we're never gonna have fucking time machines and lightsabers if nobody works on it,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's one of the big problems with academia is like, they don't fund that, or you're crazy, or whatever. And so it's like, we need, like Cathy said, like people who demand that stuff. It's like, somebody work on a time machine, somebody work on a lightsaber, somebody work on creating unicorns. Like, that's what we want. That's what we grew up being told was possible.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's okay to want those things and try to build them. Like, that's the amazing thing about being human, is that we can.
Yeah. Sorry, just one more thing. It's like
Yeah.
when we graduated college, or sorry, I didn't graduate college. When people graduate college, if you're really smart, right, and like accomplish, get good grades, good extracurriculars, you just want to be an accountant or like not like consultant, finance person, investment banking, or a doctor. Like those are things that are from playbooks that have been established for over 100 years. I think it's time to do more. I think for all the young people that are listening to this, that are thinking about what they can do in their life to make a really big impact, it's probably not working for McKinsey making slides at 1 a.m. in the morning with like please fixes in an email. It's probably building like a lightsaber or like a time machine, like doing things that actually progress humanity and dreaming bigger with the other smart people in your generation. That's what actually changes the culture and what we can get as humanity in the next 10 to 50 years.
What keeps you both sane? Like building.
Who says we're sane?
Fair enough. I guess the awareness and the like agreeing that you are insane might keep you sane. I don't know, but it's hard, right? Building a startup is hard. Building something that is so against the cultural like
for sure.
norms, and then academia being a kind of against academia and maybe not getting their support. Is it just like the progress, the like will to see this vision come to life? Is it just like a very clear vision of like, I want to be able to breathe on Mars and go to those planets, and instead of sending a robot there, like what keeps you going?
I think each other, that's one thing is like, Cathy and I are, even when we're not in the same place, we're always communicating on WhatsApp and calling each other and just like trying to have a relationship that's more than just building a company, supporting each other and helping each other. And I think our business in general, we're trying to build something where it's like, we're not just trying to make money, and we don't want people coming into work just to make money. We want to be there for each other and support each other, and just support network of friends and family. That really helps. And, occasional drinking and cannabis and stuff.
Yeah, I think I'm a hyper logical person at the end of the day. So, like, to me, this makes so much sense that I'm like, there is no other way. Like, this has to be done, and like, it just has to be. And I know I'm like, that's what I have to do, and this is the thing I want to build. I think it needs to exist. So nothing else really matters, and I almost turn off like, hey, I like, need something to support me. I just have to do this. Like, and I think it's always nice to have other like-minded people like Josie and our team to really be aligned in that vision, and our investors, and really anybody that has shown support in this space. But at the end of the day, it's just a hyper-logical decision, just like dropping out of school when I was 18 years old to try to build a biotech company. It's all about...
That was hyper-logical, dropping out?
Yeah, I mean, the way it happened was, I was 18, I was working in the lab, I was doing my undergrad, I had like 3 jobs. I was working in the lab. I was actually a mobile app developer for a lab, like a mobile development lab in my school. And then I was building some other startup on the side. So I was really busy, but like I had a lot of ambition at 18 years old. And I look around in my lab at the time, it was all PhDs and postdocs. Everybody was super smart. And they're all miserable. They're all working like 12 to 14-hour days, being paid minimally. And they're just running these PCRs all day, every day. And I'm like, I don't want to be like you. Like, that's not, like, I want to do science, but I don't want to be like you. And then I was like, okay, well, if I want to do science research, what else what do I have to do? What's my other option? To control like my experiments, like to do the things I actually want to do. Okay, all right, for profit. All right, so I have to do a startup. I have to take the tech business model of building a startup, apply it to biotech somehow. That's already pretty challenging, but I'm like, it's worth it. It's either that or academia, where everybody else, like 10 years older than me, are miserable. So I kind of started that way, and then I realized, okay, it's actually kind of terrible because you're either a pharma company or a biotech services company. If you're a biotech services company, you have barely any margin to do really cool things. You're actually at the mercy of like your customers forever, indefinitely. So I'm like, okay, well, that didn't work. It worked to a certain degree. Like, it's still a good company. It's profitable, but the thing is, it's not what I wanted to do. So I keep searching for answers in a hyperlogical way. So when I did drop out of school, it was hard, but also it wasn't hard because the decision was so clear. I didn't want to be like the people around me. Then that was the only choice. So that makes it a little bit easier to just hyper rationalize.
I mean, founder's journey is so hard. I would like discourage people, because it's just like, it's so lonely. It's so hard. It's a lot of times you and your co-founder are the only people who, you're the only people who are fighting for this thing. You only have yourself or each other. And that can be really hard. It really can be. It's like, I hope one day I can work for somebody else again. Because it's just like, being the startup founder for the past 10 years now, it is really, really hard.
So what advice would you give, I guess, to that person who's probably stuck in academia, who like wanted to be a scientist, wants to work on cool things, but is currently stuck hearing this, thinking, I'm in that, like all I'm working on are these papers for other people, and it's like marginal improvements.
That's a tough one, because it's like,
drop out and get a CRISPR kit?
Maybe, but it's like, there's not a lot of companies doing interesting stuff in biotech, so it's like you drop out and then you just go to big pharma, which not saying it's not any better than academia. I don't know, but I think it's like it definitely takes very brave, very ambitious people to do what Cathy and I are doing, and yeah, you know, build up a support network of people who really support you. Reach out to us, you know,
Yeah.
to get some advice or input, but it's something that's brave and inspiring, and you will do things that nobody else thought possible, but it's definitely hard. Yeah.
I think apply to an incubator is always a good idea. Like, that's how I got started. I applied to Indie Bio. We were part of the first batch. Indie Bio is like a biotech incubator, like Y Combinator, but with a lab. I think YC also does something like that. No free clout though, giving sponsorships. Kidding. But yeah, I think that's a good way to get started, at least be exposed to something that's not academia and something that you can possibly start on your own. It's definitely not for
Advice.
everybody though, but what we're trying to hopefully do is push for a change of how biotech companies are viewed, what kind of biotech companies are started, and giving really talented scientists an opportunity or inspiration to do something really cool as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both for sharing all this with me and making the time. I'd love to take a look around the lab if you could show me around a
Yeah.
little bit.
Yeah.
Cool.
I feel like a lot of times as scientists or founders, we don't just fuck around and have fun enough. When you start fucking around and having fun, sometimes you like learn a lot more than you did when you were like doing experiments, you know,
Yeah.
which is really cool. We're kind of like inspired, trying to think more creatively, you know, think about life. You know, obviously this is made to represent a living thing. You can see the tail, it's almost flesh-like. And so it's just like thinking about living things in a different way. Like, what if our environment that surrounded us, the things we used, were more alive, were biological? So we have a lab automation robot from Trillo Bio, a lot of other embryo editing stuff here for basically shocking embryos. You can put electricity through embryos and it can help DNA get in instead of sticking a needle into the embryo. This has like 96 wells on it, so you can do like 96 different experiments at the same time. Nobody's even thinking about scaling embryo editing. If you can edit 10,000 embryos, 100,000 embryos in a day, it totally changes the game. Anybody can genetically modify a plant based on what we built. You think about creating designer plants, just like people at home selling them on Etsy or something like that. That would be so cute. How do we make it accessible so that there's more people doing it? Because it's like, you can only do so much. You can only do so much by yourself.
Right.
We have some human cells over here.
So you can work with human cells, just not embryos.
Like out here.
Yeah.
You can do whatever you want, but these human cells are very robust. Let me get it on a glove.
Wow.
So you can see the individual cells. These have grown packed pretty tight, but it's basically like a layer of skin. We've modified all types of cells, even our own stem cells. You're basically hacking a cell, right? So you create a piece of DNA that tricks the cell into thinking it's its own DNA. So you do have to code it. So it tells it like, this is DNA for a human cell, and this is how you read it, and this is where it starts, and this is where it stops. So basically like a computer program. And basically, once that gets inside the cell, it tricks the cell into thinking it's its own DNA, and it uses it to do whatever you want. So it's basically like exploiting and hacking the operating system of a cell. We fulfill a ton of orders for people who are trying to do genetic engineering in their home or schools, universities, high schools.
You're saying you could order something online?
Yeah, you could make it yourself, but it's just like nowadays it's so inexpensive. It's like, you know, I'm not gonna make it. I'm just gonna have a company make it for me. It's really an amazing part of what we do is just like making it accessible. When it comes down to it, it's like that education, I think, is the foundation of, you know, anything we do, of the cultural and social change.
I love it. You're like,
Yeah.
education is the foundation, but also fuck academia.
Well, it doesn't have to be academic education.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, it just has to be getting knowledge and consuming that knowledge, right? And that's the thing. And like, don't get me wrong, I don't think I would be where I am today without getting a PhD and getting that education. But it's also like, I think it hurts more people than it helps a lot of times, right? I'm not saying it can't help people, and education is amazing, and you know, it's such a benefit to so many people, but also like nobody's gonna teach you the knowledge on how to overthrow them. The microscope graveyard right there.
Is that what that is? They broke?
No, it's just like pulling parts, and you know, it's kind of just our microscope graveyard. The one taxidermied mouse. We ordered one off of Etsy with the goal of trying to optimize sperm collection for mice. You know, as you can imagine, using a taxidermied mouse and how that would happen. Right?
Yeah.
But it didn't work out quite as
No.
planned. But what scientists do now is they just kill the animal. Seriously, they just kill every animal that they want to collect sperm or eggs from. And one of our main goals is to like do this stuff not that way. It's a fucking bloodbath. Some of these scientific papers are like, we used 1,000 embryos, and it's about 20 embryos in mammals per animal, and you're just like, holy shit, you just killed 50 mice. Like, damn.
Yeah,
They just
that's
get
crazy.
slaughtered. It's like mouse genocide in academia. These are frog embryos that were just CRISPR'd yesterday, I think. Yeah. So you can see the CRISPR. It's more just like the conditions of the animals. Yeah. So I don't know if you could see that through the filter.
Yeah. So he has jellyfish something injected into him?
Yeah, jellyfish DNA.
Embryo editing.
Yeah.
Do you learn how to use all of this equipment when you get a PhD? Like,
No, fuck no. I had to
Wait.
teach myself.
seriously?
Yeah. The number of labs who actually do this stuff in the US is like so tiny. The stuff that academics are trying to study and are interested in like isn't this. So it's actually really fun because this thing is like controlled by a joystick. Stab the embryos and inject them. So it's basically like a little video game. So this is like 1980s technology. Basically what it does is it just heats up a glass tube and pulls it apart. So, and basically from it, you create the tiniest needle. The heat heats it up so the glass becomes melted, and then it pulls it back so it just like forms a little needle tip, like the tiniest needle tip, so it can stick it in a single cell. When you think about all the stuff you can do with animals in agriculture, you can have like deer that glow in the dark so people don't run into them, right? Worms that like eat plastic and throw them on the side of the road in LA. If we can really get a grasp on this animal gene editing thing, there's so many applications that can really, you know, just benefit the world and make people live forever.